Drop your money, it's another 20 on the red. Say you're lucky in life. Welcome back to the show. We appreciate you joining us. Today is going to be a continuation of our discussion on songwriting. The title of today's show is Scribble Art, Gibberish, and Writing Lyrics. Now, if that's intriguing, it is kind of, what's that about? Well, anyway, we're going to talk about that. But before that, I want to answer some questions. A couple things have come up. First is, what about the two logos? Well, this logo is for the vidcast, which we publish from Stage Coup Records YouTube. We ask you to subscribe there so that we can send you updates when the new releases are coming out, and we thank you. This logo is for the podcast. And the podcast, we publish that from Podbean, but that's the audio version of today's show. Both shows are the same. One's video, one's audio. We ask you to download, we ask you to support, ask you to send in comments. We thank you for it, and without you, none of it would mean anything. But we do appreciate it, and we do thank you. So today, back in the first episode, we began talking about the songwriting process, the art process, and the issue of inspiration, the issue of being attentive to those things, being quick to write things down, quick to cooperate with those kinds of inspirations that come. As an artist, that's where it starts. And you need to pay attention, you need to be aware of it. In the beginning of our writing or guitar playing or any of these things, any form, the first thing you do is you develop craft. You develop your skills. You develop the ability to do what you do, whether it's an instrument, you learn the instrument, you play the instrument. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect before you start actually doing things. That's one of the wonderful things about this generation of art, is that you can be at any level of your performance. You can be at any level of your technical skills and still produce something and contribute something. And but you do learn craft. One of the early things is learning craft. The second thing is you develop a process. You learn a process of doing songs, of writing songs, of performing things, of painting, of writing stories. You develop a process. You begin to learn that there is a process, and there's a relationship with inspiration. There's a relationship with what some people call the muse. That's a term that people have different ideas about, but it's something that's very real, and every artist that is with it any time understands it and sees that. There is that thing of the muse, that thing of inspiration. And developing a quick response and a fluidity of cooperating with it is a big part of growing as an artist and growing as a performer and any of the other things that have to do with this process of art. Well, after some of the early things of process that I have learned was this. We're going to talk about writing lyrics. Sometimes wonderful things happen and lyrics come fluid and you write them down from beginning to end. I've had that happen a lot. It's really, really exciting because then you just take that and form it into a song, or it's a poem, or it's a form of prose. But when those things come and you write them down, that's wonderful. But a lot of times inspiration begins with a hook, a thought, an idea, a rhythm. And that's what we spoke about in the first pilot episode with the song Runaround. It began with just simply it just began with a chord structure, a chord rhythm. And then the process of writing the lyric comes up. Now, I'm going to take a rabbit trail here to go back to tell you something that I developed and learned when I was a very young boy. I always was an artist, a drawing artist. I did lots of drawing when I was young. I drew comic books. I drew pictures for friends. I always excelled in that sort of thing when I was young. It was my primary source of art, even though I was learning to play guitar and I was playing in bands. Well, one of the techniques and things that just naturally happened to me was what I call scribble art. Now, scribble art is just where I begin just to start drawing and scribbling lines on a piece of paper, and I slowly begin to see something forming in the lines that I'm drawing. And so I begin to not just create it, I begin to follow it, and I follow it into form. This was almost always had to do with things like human faces. I've had this thing about human faces since I was very, very young. But I would just draw, and as you begin to watch it, it begins to take form, and so I'm no longer taking the lead. I'm actually cooperating with what I see developing. And when you get to the end of all of that, it ends up being these faces with feeling and emotion. And we have this demonstration that I'm showing you of that. But one of the things that developed in me was this idea of learning to follow what's happening when I'm creating a piece of art. Not coming with my own mind and saying, this is what it's going to be, this is how it's going to be. That doesn't work for me. And learning how to cooperate and follow is a more productive way, at least from my experience, of being fluid and being able to come up with ideas that you would never come up with. Well, so that's what I call scribble art. And this demonstration here, for those on the podcast, you're not seeing it, but as we're watching it on the vidcast, there's a demonstration of that going on. Well, songwriting is very similar. In fact, every part of this stuff is very similar as far as creating art, being in that way. When you write lyrics, so sometimes it's a hook, sometimes the lyrics come very fast and then it's just structure. But sometimes you start out with lyrics, and I talked about in the early episode, I talked about gibberish. I just say gibberish. And I'll be doing a rhythm thing where it's like the boom, that's for say I love or something like that. And then not quite that bad. I would be disgraced. But what you do is you begin to fill the space of the lyric. You begin to fill it, and then like a couple of syllables out of that may start striking you, and you pay attention to it. So it's the same process as scribble art. It's like you begin to see something forming in the gibberish, something forming, and you take those and you put it into order. And then you are very much a part of this process, because our mind, our part of us, becomes very cooperative, because we decide, what is this about? I'm doing gibberish language here, and I'm going, well, what's this song about? And I'm thinking about tone, I'm thinking about story, and then inevitably that starts becoming a story that I can recognize, and I'm actually writing, but I'm actually following, if that makes any sense. I've done this many, many times. So when you're young, you learn craft, you learn process, and this process, you learn the process, but then you learn to trust the process. I know a lot of artists, they're skittish, or they're fearful, or they're intimidated, or whatever it is, and they shy back. But you can trust the process. When you get to the end of the song and it's crap, you can throw it away. But getting to the end of the project, getting to the end of the piece of art, is much better than abandoning the piece of art. And then we become more disciplined. That's craft. We become more responsive. That's intuitive, spiritual art craft. The process of it all. We learn to trust that process. And that brings us to these things that what makes art and songwriting and all of this stuff so amazing. It's amazing because you look at it and you go, wow, I did that. Wow, I didn't do that. And I've heard everyone from Bob Dylan to tons and tons and tons of artists, Tom Petty, all these guys and Neil Young, all of these guys discussing this, saying, I don't know, I just learned to respect it. Because I really believe art is very near and very close to being is a spiritual thing. And we'll talk more about that. But besides that, in this process, Scribble Art and Gibberish and writing lyrics is all part of this process. And that's about the best way I could explain this to you. It's hard to talk about things that are from the heart and that you deal with from the heart. But as an artist, you're in some form going to see these kinds of things. And you learn to become more in tune to it and become more fluid at it. And your skills get better. And people say, wow, look at you. And you go, It's a good way to keep yourself humble, to realize that we really are in the schoolroom of learning. One of the songs that I wrote, and this is several years ago, one of the songs I wrote with this process of gibberish is the song State of Mind. I want to show you now the final version of, there's two versions of this song. One is the studio version, which is slightly different and spent quite a bit of time on it. And then there's the live version that we do now in Blind Drifter Luke. And I'm going to show you now, we're going to cut away now at the end of the show here to show you the performance with Johnny G and myself, Blind Drifter Luke, and we're going to show you the final product of that. We do thank you for joining us. We ask you to subscribe. Stage Coup Records, that's Stage, C-O-U-P, records.com. And we thank you, that's our flagship, but also at YouTube, Stage Coup Records. And we'll let you know we are now releasing these episodes on Mondays, not Fridays like we originally said. So, and on Mondays you can find us at Podbean, or you can find us as The Meeting Underground in your podcast app and on Stage Coup Records YouTube. And we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you following it. We thank you for the opportunity for us to have this meeting together, this meeting of art, this meeting of us, this meeting of these worlds. And we thank you for joining us here on The Meeting Underground. Here's State of Mind.